Hey Adeola, so welcome to Jeff's Podcast Academy, and it's really happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started in this field of podcasting.
Thank you so much for having me. And I started in podcasting in 2016.
Mhm.
I just had this interest in because my background is in media production, project management, and I had this desire to produce podcasts. But then I was still producing events, photo shoots, and video shoots.
Mhm.
And I remember reaching out to a friend of mine. She had a small business. I was asking if you ever want someone to produce a podcast for you, I'll be interested. That was my first foray into podcasting. But it wasn't until 2019
Mhm.
that I was at a point where I wanted to niche down, focus what I was doing.
Mhm.
Because I was doing a lot. I was producing events, I was producing photo shoots, I was producing video shoots.
Mhm.
And I wanted to niche down into something.
Mhm.
But I thought of podcasting, but I was like, I don't know much about podcasting. I know, but not enough to say I'm going to be a podcast producer. But then COVID happened in 2020, which is everyone's story lately. Then COVID happened and I couldn't shoot videos because I had to be in person. I couldn't produce video shoots. I couldn't do events because it was all in person. And the one thing that I could do was podcasting.
Mhm.
So I decided, okay, I'm going to step into this podcasting role and see what it's all about. I took a class, like a program, to learn more about the technical part of it. And I found out just the production piece is similar to what I've done.
Yeah.
Producing a podcast involves a skills of managing people and managing projects. And that's how I got started. COVID happened, decided to niche down into it because that was the only thing on my plate to do. Took a course, and here we are.
That's pretty awesome. And it's really great. I've seen a lot, I've interviewed a lot of people, and they've all mentioned that initially they weren't, came in as a podcaster. Like they were as a musician or a DJ even, and they would have transitioned it into this. And this is one thing I want to follow up with the things that you mentioned. You said you asked your friend that, if in case at any time she wants to do a podcast production, then you would help. So there are a lot of podcast producers or managers out there who want to have a start, right? Somewhere they want to start. So how do you think that without any awkwardness that they can ask their friend, because they may say no, like ultimately, and they may break your heart. So yeah, can you tell a little bit about that?
About what it felt like asking my friend.
Yeah.
Honestly, my background is in media and
Mhm.
storytelling. So I am a storyteller at heart.
Mhm.
So I approached my friend because I knew she had a story,
Mhm.
and it was a story that people could learn from and take, lessons from. So that was my intention was more to produce a story in a podcast format. I
Mhm.
wasn't thinking the technicals. I wasn't thinking of all the marketing pieces. I was just thinking of, I'm a storyteller. I can produce a nice series of you telling your story in each episode. That was my idea. So I just asked her, like, if you ever want to do a podcast, think of
Mhm.
me. But at that point, I'm glad she didn't. She said yes, go ahead and do it. But then things happened. I never got to it. But I'm glad I didn't because I wasn't thinking about podcasting as a whole in
Mhm.
terms of the launching, the editing,
Yeah.
the show notes, the graphics. I was just thinking of, you have a story, let's tell it.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, what angle do you, if you're thinking of getting into podcasting, to think about your why.
Mhm.
Mine is to tell stories. That
Mhm.
was my initial beginning why. But also think about what you need to do to make the story come alive. There's a lot that goes into
Mhm.
podcasting beyond just saying
Yeah.
I have a story to tell. However, I always say, think about what role do you want to play in the production of a podcast, because there's so many roles you can take on. So it
Mhm.
might be that you I just want to edit. That's what you want to do. I just want to write show notes. I just want to be involved in the marketing. I just want to be involved in finding sponsors. I want to be involved in pitching people to be on other post podcast. So you could either be a full, because my team and I were a full production company, or you
Mhm.
could step into something that is your skill set. If
Yeah.
podcasting was a thing back when I was talking to my friend, I would have solely be a producer doing much more the concepting, the strategy versus all the little details. So it's always
Mhm.
fun to think about, what are my skills? What am I willing to learn? And what am I willing to bring to the table if I don't want to do it all?
Got it. So, this Chris and Tina, like, what's actually the name? I mean, like, because I was so creeped out when, this different name came in. I didn't actually check your bio really that much. Then I
Yeah.
actually saw CEO, your name was there. So how did this name came in? Like, any
Yeah.
backstory
So
on that?
yeah, there's a backstory. Christiana is actually my first name. My first name is Christiana.
Wow.
So when I had my wedding company,
Hmm.
it was Christiana Events. I had an event company. And then I transitioned into project management of doing events, but also managing projects. So I was like, I'm going to make it even more fancy and make it Chris and Tiana. So Chris is more the event planning side, and
Yeah.
Tiana was more project management. And people that knew me then always thought it was me saying Chris and Tiana, man and woman getting married. But that wasn't the idea behind
Yeah.
it. But I can see how that can be. But
Yeah.
it's my first name and it just stuck. And I'm like, when I transitioned into podcasting, I kept the name.
Interesting. That's great. So let's just jump on to a couple of things that you as an expertise have, and I think the audience would be really like they'll be great to hear about this as well. So one of the things is, so you know doing B2C podcast is kind of like an easier thing. So considering people already know their why, so mostly they will produce, let's say, a sports podcast or any form of B2C podcast for that matter. But some people would be like doing B2B podcast. Let's say I'm actually currently in a job right now, and they kind of do company to company services like blockchain or artificial intelligence, something like that. So how do you think they would be able to produce or plan their entire podcast production accordingly? Anything that you have?
I would say for a business to business podcast, as I think about some of the clients I work to, some of them actually work with B2B. I'm thinking of one podcast. It's a podcaster that she's a marketing strategist, and she's doing the podcast is for retail entrepreneurs on the digital space. So maybe in Target, in Walmart, in all those big retail companies. And I would say in planning your podcast is still a marketing platform. And even though you're doing B2B, your goal is still to talk to an audience, is still to send a message to a target audience. So I would say the mechanics behind it isn't all that different. It's thinking about what's your why for this podcast and who are you trying to talk to and what are you trying to say to them. I think for any business, whether you're doing B2C to buy from you or B2B to buy from you, you still have to have the basic framework of what is it you want to say, who is it you want to talk to, and why is it important for them to get this message. I would say that's the basic thing you need to have. And then you're still trying to sell. Yeah. It's trying to sell that you're selling to direct to consumer or to another business. So it's always planning your podcast production around what is it you're trying to sell. I always say no matter what podcast you have, unless you're doing podcast for as a hobby, you should be talking about what you do on your podcast, what you're trying to sell on your podcast. What are the benefits you have to get to anyone listening to your podcast? So it's always important to think about your what, your why, and your who, but also what is it you're selling, and how can you incorporate that into every single episode that you produce for your podcast. Whether you're bringing a guest on to talk to the audience, or you're doing a solo episode, or you're talking directly to one of the business you're trying to talk to, it's important that you are constantly infusing into your episodes, into your podcast episodes, what it is that you do and what is you're trying to give or sell. Because let's be honest, if you're doing B2B, you're selling what you're trying to sell, making that a constant thing you're talking about. I'm not like in a salesy way, like buy from me, but letting people know that you as a host, as a business owner, you have this to offer and you do it well. And this is why it's important that you listen to me, like me, trust me, and then buy from me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But it's just a thought that I had. Like, people have become really more clever these days, I guess. They would clearly know a sales pitch when they see one. So do you think when would be the right time for the podcast host to do a particular sale? Like, for example, should that person have like 10,000 listens, or should that person have a particular email list? There should be some threshold, like from this point you can start.
I think you can start talking about what you do when you start. So selling, like I said, people are getting clever. So you just saying buy from me is not the way to sell.
Yeah.
I think right from the beginning, from your episode 1, you should start letting people. And the goal of a podcast, one of the goals is for you to build the know, like, and trust factor. Most people don't buy from you if they don't trust you.
Yeah.
And people may not trust you if they don't like you. And people really like you, they don't know you. So it's important that right from the start, you're already infusing into your episodes who you are, what you do, what you have to offer. So if I'm listening to your if I'm listening to a podcast about, I don't know, maybe from a therapist, I should be able to know from the episodes that you are a therapist, that you work with this kind of, like maybe you work with mainly men. So if I'm listening, I know that you're not the counselor for me or therapist for me. I already know, okay, this is a therapist, but the audience they speak to is men. So you already in that establish yourself as an expert. Let people know who you are, and as you share more with each episode, I get to like you. And okay, I like what you have to say. I can trust that you are an expert. And when it comes to the point where I need a therapist for my cousin, my son, my brother, I can say, look at this person as an option. So I would say people are getting clever, but I think they're also getting more smart to the idea that you just coming out and saying buy from me is not a tactic that works anymore. You have to let audience know you, and you let people know you by consistently sharing what you do, giving good, valuable content with each episode. So when it's time to buy, I can say, oh, I remember listening to this podcast. They didn't say buy from me, but they were selling. Whether we want to sugarcoat it or not, you're always selling. Even when you do this podcast, I'm selling. I'm letting you know I'm a podcast producer. This is what I do for a living. I'm not saying buy from me, but I'm letting you know this is what I do. This is what I have to offer.
Yeah, I guess that's a subtle way of putting it there that, you do this. So yeah, that's an option. Because, when I was doing college, when I was studying marketing, after I studied marketing, the one thing I came to know is I can't trust people anymore. It's like when someone comes to you and say, you're really nice, how such a good person you are. I'm like, okay, what do you want from me? That is the first thing that actually came to my mind. It really took a toll after studying marketing. Then I was like, okay, not all people are like that. Some people are genuine and everything. So yeah, because I've seen a lot of memes or a lot of videos online. People are really talking about this stuff. That's what I meant when people are getting clever, actually. But yeah, I think your way, when you say subtle way of saying it or not saying at all, may even work. When you just say, what do you do?
Also, it's important that I think one thing that I say as a business owner is that my clients are important to me. I care about my clients. And that comes across in how I talk to them, how I work with them, how I sell to them. I'm about making money, but if all I'm about is making money, that is going to be so clear. No one, and we're all getting clear, but no one just wants to buy for someone that wants to make money. Make sure that you actually clear about the people you're talking to and speaking to, and that you can solve their problem. Because I can give you money and then realize that you are fraud. And I will let the whole world know that by putting up a Yelp review or something, or Google review. So it's important that you have you're doing business, but you care about the people you're doing business with. So even if you're selling, people like, yes, she's selling, it's business, but I trust this person. I trust that they can offer me what I need. And, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Cool. So, coming on to the next topic, it's like there are a lot of podcast managers out there. The one thing that obviously they would do, I've seen a lot of Instagrammers, especially they, show as a podcast manager more than LinkedIn. It's just really, I don't know. It's just really unusual for me because LinkedIn is more of a B2B platform for, podcast producers and everything, but they do a lot of branding on Instagram, especially. So any tips on people who are just starting out as a podcast managers, regarding branding, like how should they start? That would be great.
I would say where you come to, like, two things. Where do you, the kind of clients you want to work with, where do they play? Where do they work and play? And also what is a comfortable platform for you to be on? I have most of my clientele, not most, but a lot of my clientele come from Instagram. However, LinkedIn is a viable platform for me to find clients because I work with a lot of B2B clients. Yeah. So it's a viable platform for me to get clients. But when I look at the stats and say what is working right now, for me it's Instagram. So I put energy in that, while also, I say LinkedIn is a good place to start putting energy, but I'm not going to let Instagram go because LinkedIn is a great place for B2B.
Yeah.
But also, what is because social media can get tiring. So I'm always saying, even just marketing in general can get tiring, but I'm always saying, what is a place where your clients or your audience conjugate and play, and where is a place that you like to be or that you enjoy, that it's not a hustle for you to be on. So I always say merge those two when you brand. Don't just go be on Facebook because everyone sees your clients on Facebook. You don't enjoy being on Facebook. Then you're going to end up doing it for a month and then falling off because I don't want to be here. But so find somewhere where your clientele, your target market is at, but it's also a place that you're comfortable and enjoy playing and marketing at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So, okay, this may be a really obvious question, but on Instagram, if you're just starting as a podcast manager, it can be really tempting to just cold message people like, hi, this is me, I'm doing podcast managing, not to sell, but, just to get a review of the profile or follow, whatever it is. Do you think it's good, or what's your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I'm not one that I don't necessarily say this is the rule for anything. It depends on how I wouldn't say it's good or bad. It depends on how you approach it. I've cold pitched people on Instagram. I've cold pitched people on emails. It's how do I, and people always talk about, people don't like when people come to them, the first thing they do is to ask. I think it depends on how you go about asking. I'm not against DMing someone cold pitching and saying, hey, I saw your Instagram, or I saw that you mentioned that you're looking for a podcast manager. I may not be following you. I've started following you, but how do I present myself to you? You obviously have a need. So I might as well step into that and see if you're willing to let me help you fill it. But also it's important to know, do people need your services? If you're not sure if someone needs your services, hang around their Instagram before you go cold pitch them. So I wouldn't rarely ever go in someone's email and DM and say, do you want to start a podcast? If yes, it's a waste of my time. I haven't qualified you as a potential lead. I'm just assuming. But if you put on your Instagram and say, oh, I'm thinking of starting a podcast, that if I've never spoken to you ever, I can reply and say, yes, hi, I'm a podcast producer. So I think we just have to read the room and see what's happening. What are they saying? So I'm all for cold pitching when done right. I'm not against cold pitching, whether I know you or not. It's just depending on how do you go about presenting yourself. And are you gathering enough information to make this cold pitch the right cold pitch to be making at that point in time?
Yeah, exactly. The main reason why I asked this, I'm also really not against it because I've done pretty bit of spamming people in a lot of ways. When I was really so enthusiastic in marketing and stuff, I was doing that, not like client pitching, but just normal way of follow and stuff. But there was this one person who actually on my LinkedIn, that person is like, I don't want to call that person desperate, but the sentences that person will be sending like, please try it my service just for 1 month, it will be working out really well. Then all the stuff, still that person is texting me, even though I don't reply it. So I think that would be, I don't know, that's a threshold, right? To do something.
I wouldn't spam people. I wouldn't recommend spamming. I wouldn't recommend that. But I also wouldn't recommend saying a need that someone expressed. And stepping into it. But then it's not just the initial cold pitch or the initial in saying I can help you. It's the follow-up. And that's when it can get dicey, when you're spamming, you're sending messages every other hour, every week. It's like, how do you, I don't want to use the word finesse because it sounds manipulative, but how do you structure a follow-up sequence with someone you want to work with without spamming them? So it's beyond even the cold, because some people never reply to you until you follow up. Or onto the second or third follow-up. So I'm all about stepping out and saying needs and requesting to fill them. I'm against spamming, but I think you can be strategic in how you reach out to people that you don't know that you want to work with. I don't live by the rules of you can cold pitch people in the DMs. Yes, you can. People will say, people are doing businesses in their DMs. People are making money in the DMs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great. So, just following up with this, there's this one point where, you mentioned that you have to, show as an expert in your own field in order to, get more clients or, whatever, in a sense that you're either a podcaster or a podcast guest. So like, do you think that should we start a podcast with like zero audience? For example, let's say I'm starting a podcast right now, then at the same time, I'm creating my Instagram, LinkedIn, or whatever it is. Or should I create my social media first, get some engagement, talk about it for 6 months or 7 months, then I should start a podcast? Like, do you think which one suits more in a best possible way?
I don't think, well, maybe that's just me. So I might have a blind spot, but I don't think anyone in this internet world is starting anything from zero for the most part.
Yeah.
Most of us, a lot of us are on one platform or the other, whether you're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikToks, we're on one platform or the other. So I don't buy into the idea that anyone is starting from zero in this world that we are right now. However, I would say it's nice to start a podcast with an audience. It's nice because then you're getting listeners and it helps you want to keep pushing forward. However, because podcasting is a long-term strategy, it takes a while for you, unless you have a huge platform like Obama or you're Beyonce or something that has Oprah.
Yeah.
Podcasting, no matter where you're starting from, is a long-term strategy. And for us, that people that were not celebrities, we have to start and run the race to get it to grow. So I would say you can actually start both. One, because no one, for the most part, is in this world that we are in have no followers. We all have followers somewhere.
Yeah.
One thing. But because also podcasting is a long-term strategy, even if you have followers, don't expect to drop a podcast a day and have 1 million views or 1,000 views. It's the exception of the rule. So I would say you can start both. You can start your podcast, keeping in mind that it's a long-term strategy. So even if I have a lot of followers, I don't expect to start now and have 1,000 views in the first week or the first 6 months. You're going to have to grow. So why not just start and just do the work and then grow the social media in other ways that you can, and they can actually help each other grow each other. So I think I buy into the idea that you definitely have a following somewhere. Okay. So start your podcast and market to that following. And then see how you can grow, because your podcast is going to take a while to grow anyways. You might as well start.
Yeah. It's interesting because, when you mentioned like one platform might have one following, another platform might have another following. For example, you may have like millions of listens on your podcast, but if you go and see Instagram, it won't be having much of a following. I've seen a lot of podcasters, they're like top on the charts and everything. If I go say Instagram profile, it's not much. Yeah.
Because maybe those podcasts do have a strategic way of using SEO, because the Google is another way for you to draw people to your podcast. Right now, we're talking about how to name your podcast episode that it's searchable. Yeah. Now you can actually find things with audio with Alexa and Siri. So you don't have to have a huge Instagram, Facebook platform to get following on your podcast, because there are other ways you can use show notes on your website, get it SEO optimized, make sure your episode titles are optimized, that when people are searching, they can search for something and you can pop up. And now I believe you can actually now set up your podcast on some podcast host to be audio search optimized, so people can actually search for something and you will pop up. So there are many ways you can, even with a low following or small following on Instagram, that you can build a podcast listenership, because there are other ways to go about doing that without having to be mainly your followers on Instagram, especially if they are just family and friends. Maybe they don't care about your topic. Maybe they're not your audience. They're not talking about who you want to talk to. But then they can help spread the word to get those people to come to your platform, whether to Instagram and then to the podcast, or to the podcast and then to Instagram. I think they can both work. They can work off of each other.
Got it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, in one of the posts that you posted, I actually saw something about podcast reports. So, to be honest, like the one podcast report that I know is whenever I see the listening platforms and how much listenership or how much monetization. That's the couple of things. Is there anything else that, in general, like a podcast manager, let's say, should give as a report to the client, say at the end of the month or something? Anything at all?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say should, but the things that we gather, Chris and Tiana, we would gather we do accumulative. So maybe it's the month of October. Would gather what the total overall download was for that month.
Yeah.
Would gather what the highest of the episodes that you dropped that month or the past 30 days, what has the highest view. We would gather on your website which of the episodes are gathering the most, because podcast listeners can come from different places, and some may come from your website, some may land on your website first. So we're looking at what are people landing on your website, which episode are people coming to, and where are they coming from? Yeah. Is it Google? Is it Instagram? Is it Pinterest? Is it through your email list? What is it that is drawing them to this particular episode? We look at other charts. So Chartable, like where are you trending on Chartable? On Apple, what's going on? We look at the back end of Apple. This episode that you dropped, all the 4 episodes you dropped this month, which one are people listening to, and how long are they listening to it? So we gather each for each month, and then we also, like my team and I, we do a report for each month. For this month, this is what happened. We grew by 2,000 listeners, or we stayed steady. So we're not gaining new listeners, but we stayed steady. We're not losing listeners. So it's different things to gather. Also depends on what's important to the host. What is the goal and vision of the host? And so you have, at the time you think about what is it that they want to accomplish, and which of these numbers helps tell the story for what they want to accomplish. If they want to grow the email list, which of how many people came from the podcast to the email list, that could be a stat you gather. So it's important to think about what is the host, what's most important to the host, what can help the host achieve the goals they have for their podcast, and then gather that information to say, this is what we're doing, this is what is happening that is helping move your goal forward. Or as you get to know a host, you get to know what they need, because you are the expert. So you get this is what you're saying, but this is what your podcast is doing. And this is why this may be something to consider as a goal or a vision as we move forward. So the different, I would say, gather the stats based on the whys and the vision of the host, but also think about what is important to help the host gather and get to their goals that they're not even thinking about.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I think there's a lot of also categories will be going into it. But the one thing that you mentioned is prioritize based on the whys and the vision of the host. That's the one thing.
Yeah, because you can be gathering numbers, but what does it mean? Like, okay, this month we have 10,000K this month. Last month we had 11. What does that really mean? Yeah. What does it do for your podcast? Is it just numbers, or just gathering stats? It's a vanity metric. We can't just have numbers without building into what does this mean? Does it even mean anything?
Yeah, right. Because sometimes, like, even if 10K listens, they would have earned like $1,000, but with 11 or 12K, they wouldn't have earned that much. So they need to figure out how much it works and everything. Got it. That's great. So just coming to the end of the section, I just want to ask one thing out of the box. I always do. So is it morning or evening there?
It's afternoon. It's 12:30.
12:30. Okay. So the question is, who was actually the last person that you made smile yesterday?
My dad. My dad FaceTimed me yesterday, and I always make my dad smile. So my dad yesterday. So yeah, my dad was the last person I spoke to last night.
Awesome. That's great. Awesome. So
what about you? Who did you make smile yesterday? The last person you made smile?
That would be usually my mom. I would be irritating her with something like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. She'd be like, why can't you just let me live in peace? And then I'd say, I'm just kidding. Then she'll be normal. So, just laugh. So I guess that's how it always happens.
That's cool.
Thanks for asking.
You're welcome.
Great. This one final question I want to ask is, so this is something I actually found recently on Instagram a lot. When you search for podcast manager, a lot of women podcast managers showing up. Okay, there's a lot of them, tons of them. I mean, like, I'm not trying to sound as a sexist here, but I couldn't find a single guy. I don't know why. It was really hard to find a guy. So is there any reason? Maybe they're trying to side hustle, or maybe they're trying to do something. I'm not so sure, but what is it behind it? You have any idea about that? I'm really curious on this.
I don't have an idea. I have an assumption. Like, I will call it an intelligent assumption. Well, two. Mm-hmm. One is podcasting is podcast manager and podcast producing is a great way to something you can do at home.
Yeah.
Think of mothers that have kids that want to stay at home and still make a living. So it's it's an assumption. It's an intelligent conclusion I'm making in my mind that the podcasters that some of the podcasters that are coming, podcast producers that are coming up, because it's a role that you can do from anywhere. You don't have to go into an office to be a podcast producer, podcast manager. So if you have kids, it's a great role to be in. And then thinking about when COVID happened, I think a great number of podcast producers popped up during COVID because most women had to stay home with babies, had to be at home with their babies, and many people left their jobs. And even those that had jobs that they were doing couldn't do it because they had to stay home, and staying home, it just wasn't manageable. So that's what comes to mind, is that it's a great role to do at home with kids. A great role it's also a great word. Like, I know that many virtual assistants, many people that did niche down into podcasting. Because VA can be all kinds. You've been doing a lot of things as a VA, but with podcasting, you're focused on a niche. So that might be a reason why many VAs, which many are women, niche down into podcasting. Trying to think. These are the three things that come to mind. It's just easier to do in the house. You don't have to leave the house to be a podcast manager. I have to think about that, but it's a great point, and it's a true point. Many of the podcast producers and managers I see are women.
That's great. Because, and the virtual assistant, which you mentioned, is also completely true, because there's this one client that I work with regarding video editing and all that stuff. And once we had a team meeting, and one person from Philippines, she actually joined in the meeting, and it was like around midnight, exactly midnight. She was joining. So, they have different sets of time shifts and everything. So I get it when people are trying to doing the virtual assistant and stuff. So I actually get the point on that.
You do the best with what you can. You can, if your kids are sleeping, and you can be editing. You don't have to go into the office to do anything. You don't have to. You can really craft a career that fits your lifestyle. And someone like me, that I like to travel. I don't want to be sitting. I don't want to be in one place. I don't want to be at a job where I have to go in. And podcast production is amazing. I can do it from anywhere in the world. I can lead a team in the world and be traveling and doing this work. So,
Awesome. That's great. So, it's almost the end. Is there anything else that you want to ask me? Like anything else? Tables turned.
So, tell me, do you do full podcast production, or you an editor? Or do you just produce this podcast because you enjoy podcasting? Why this podcast?
Oh, that's it. It's like, it felt like three different questions in my head for a second.
It is a couple of questions, but basically, why this podcast? Why this podcast?
Yeah. Okay. So why this podcast? Okay, this might sound a bit awkward, but I started this podcast around like 3 years ago. It didn't start as like for podcasters. It started as a different one, mainly because I got my heart broken. I was so sad. I just wanted to see whether other people are also sad. So I just hopped onto I didn't even know whether I was starting a show. I just started it and see how people are doing with their business and everything. Then later, slowly, I just did some video editing. I really loved editing and stuff. Then later on, I got my first gig. I thought, okay, it's nice. People are really paying for it. So let's see and try it out more. Then I tried it more. Then I got my team, and, they're doing like micro content management, like how Gary Vaynerchuk, does, like, picking out contents and everything. Yeah. So the why is mainly like misery loves company, but later on it came as, like it was really profitable, and it was good. I really love talking to people about, what they want and how they want to do things. So that's how it came later on. In short, I can say micro content manager / podcast producer. I don't know. That's it. There isn't a specific name for it yet. But that's how it's been going on.
When you say micro content, what does that mean? What do you do? Like, I can see. I know in your LinkedIn, you say you repurpose podcast to micro content. What does that mean?
So basically, now this recording is done. Once this recording is done, what I would do is I would take the interesting points, like let's say some of the points. Why there are lots of women podcasters. It's a topic. So different topics will be spoken in this entire episode. So I would chop it up and repurpose into like blogs, videos, graphics, and people have content, because most people, they only have 1 hour per day in their entire month. They want to post content. So I'll just make sure that they just can be consistent with all the social platforms, because I do for my YouTube and all the stuff. So yeah, I'm just trying to help others as well. Yeah.
And do you do full video edit? Like if I was like, oh, this is not me. If I was like, oh, I have a client, we want someone to go in and do full video edits and like a 30-minute video edit, clean out sounds.
Yeah.
You do that full video before you chop it up also.
Yeah. Full video editing as well. Yeah. So yeah, basically a video editor, and the thing is, I don't still getting good name for it. I don't know. So micro content creators is the only thing that comes to my mind.
Micro content sounds nice. Podcast micro content, micro content in general. But that's basically that's a need, because people have podcast episodes that are long that you can turn into email for your email list, a blog post, a reel if you do videos and all of that. So there are many ways to use a 1 hour, 30, 45-minute video to make other content. Yeah. Interesting. Great.
Oh, thank you so much. Great. So Adeola, that's really great. We had a great conversation about a lot of things. So if people want to find you and they want to ask you some things regarding services, or so, it would be great where we can find you.
Yes, so I am on Instagram at Chris Entiana, and that's ChrysAndtiana, Chris Entiana. And I'm also, my website is chrisentiana.com, and that's where you can work with us, inquire about working with us on the website, or even DM the IG page, and we would answer you, and we can take it from there.
Awesome. And yeah, she will definitely reply in the Instagram, because that's how I got her to get onto this podcast. So I'll definitely link everything in the description, so you guys can go and check it out. And thank you so much, Adeola. So once again, folks, let's see the next episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.